everybody. It is so good to see you this morning at Spring One Virtual. Well, have you ever asked that question? What is spring? Well, if you've ever asked that question, guess what? You are in the right place. Today, what we're going to cover is kind of those foundation pieces that make up spring and what does it kind of do. Then what we're going to do is talk about the projects that are around that are built on spring. Uh-oh, did I say projects? Yes, there's a lot of projects that are out there that help you can pick and choose from to build those features that enhance your business solutions. And then finally, I'm going to do a live demo and we're going to show you what Spring looks like and how to create just a quick Hello World application. But first, I do have to go in and give you, let's see, I think I'll have to do this the old-fashioned way here. Sorry about that. And here we go. Yay, we got the disclaimer. Enjoy it. Take a picture of it. Put it on the wall and show it to your children. They'll all love it. They'll be entertained. Well, with that being said, let's go on to the next line here. Well, the first thing that we're going to look at is who am I? Well, my name is Glenn. I am one of the developers at VMware. I work on Spring projects. I work on Spring Cloud Tasks, Spring Cloud Data Flow, and Mahmoud will call me and say, Glenn, the water's fine. Help me out on and give me some contributions on Spring Batch. And I'll jump over there and Oleg will break glass in case of emergency. And say, hey, Glenn, can you join me over here and give me some contribution for Spring Cloud Stream? When I'm not working on Spring projects, I'm on the board of directors of Atlanta Java Users Group, which also means I'm on the board of directors of DevNexus, the largest Java conference in the US. And it's community driven. That is so awesome to be a part of that. And this year I was voted in as a Java champion, which was a great honor. But my gosh, let's get started. The big question, what is Spring? And that is, I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to read off the slide here. Spring is a framework designed to take lots of different technologies and allows you to combine them in ways that feels natural. See, Spring gives you a consistent programming model that allows you to more easily integrate different technologies to meet your needs. You're going to kind of see this throughout the presentation. But now, if you can ask one question, you can ask two. Why Spring? Spring makes developing Java applications quicker, easier, faster, and safer for all developers. It reduces the heavy lifting and building of configuring applications. Basically, it streamlines the development experience. Well, if I can ask two questions, I'm going to ask three. Who uses Spring? Deshaun kind of brought this up earlier, but we can see that we know that Spring is used across many organizations in the industry. It has a large install base. And it's very likely you've used Spring recently with by some application out there. And what we've seen is there's an application we're going to be talking about, a project called Spring Boot. And see, what we've seen is Spring Boot numbers, download numbers growing 50% year over year for over 5 years straight. So not only do we have a large install base, but we have so many other developers that are jumping on board and creating and starting their new projects. Now, if I can ask three questions, I get four. Where do we start? And as I was trying to put the presentation together with Bob McNeese, we were sitting there going, what is a good way to discuss how to build to demonstrate how Spring is built? And another developer friend of mine named Rondo Johnson, great fellow, he says, Glenn, Legos. So guess what? We're putting Legos out here. And the way we can think of it is this way. With most project, or when we build most Lego structures, you always have this one foundation piece which you're going to build your build your structure up on. In our case, Spring uses the Spring framework. And the Spring framework provides all the tooling, and it is the foundation for all the Spring projects we're going to be talking about. And you, as a developer, will also use these same tools in your projects, which makes life so much easier. So what does it do? Well, it gives you dependency injection, eventing, validation, data binding, type conversion. It provides tools for simplifying your testing. It also provides transaction support, foundational support for DAOs, JDBC, support for observations or metrics. And this is just a short list of the stuff it gives us. And you know what? Deshaun took my thunder. He said, and it was absolutely correct, 20 years old. Spring's been out there for 20 years, but it shows no sign of slowing down. And with this year, we're going to be adding even more features, and we're going to show you some of these today. Now, while the Spring framework is completely awesome, there were some other things that was happening out in the community. And that what we were seeing is the community was having saying, well, we're pulling in more projects, more technologies. But as we pull in all these technologies, they pull in their own dependencies, right? So we pull in maybe a database dependency, a messaging framework dependency, but they have their dependencies, and there were these conflicts, these versions that didn't match up, and it was causing developers to have to go in by hand and figure out what versions to pick and where. And Spring said, what if we could create a tool that would maybe help them with their dependency management? And then there was like this, well, they always now they also have to write this configuration to be able to get to maybe a data source to a database. So they had to write all this boilerplate code. And so we said, what can we do here to help folks out? And Dr. David Sire said, well, how about this? How about something called Spring Boot? And Spring Boot is designed to be that entry point into this portfolio of Spring applications. And it solves this problem. It basically aggregates a common set of technologies and allows you to get started solving a problem immediately. And we call those that auto configuration. It provides you that code that gives you what, for example, that data source. You don't have to write that code. The dependency management problem, it does that for you. So you just bring in your boot parent, and then all those dependencies are managed for you. And here's the best part is that while I can add what we'll talk about a little bit called starters that does all this wonderful pre-configuration so you can start coding immediately. You're like, well, Glenn, what if we want to, there's some, a certain tool that we want to configure our way. Boot's great, but we want to do it our own way. How hard is it to tell Boot, use ours, not its? And the truth is you add your own configuration and Boot says, oh, they want to use their own. Awesome. They know what they're doing. They're great. We'll just stand aside. So Boot will just step aside. Now, we're going to talk about, we were talking about saying, okay, how do we pick the right Spring project to build our feature, right? To help us speed up our feature. Um, well, let's take a look at the list. Oh, that's a lot of projects that can help us build our apps. And gosh, which ones do we want to talk about? There's so many. And so think about it this way. When it's time for you to build your project, build your features, look at what Spring offers as far as all these different various types of projects. But let us go through a couple. So let's say I want to add data. I'll talk Spring data. If I want to add security, I'll add Spring security. If I want to add batch, okay. Hold on a second. That was not a good idea. Let's try it a different way. Let's do it this way. Why don't we talk about a business case and then we'll see what Spring tools we can pull in. And then as we see what tools we can bring in, we can see how they can help us build our application. All right, so first off, I need two applications to communicate with each other. How do I want to do that? I'm going to channel my inner Nate Shooter here, and I'm going to say it depends, right? How do we want to build this up? So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll just start off with something REST, app that offers a RESTful API. And so if it's offering that RESTful API, I need to write all the code to be able to receive the request, do all that processing. No. Spring offers something called MVC or Model View Controller. This framework allows us to focus on the business problem. And by utilizing Spring Framework's MVC framework, we can actually do focus on that business problem. But still, I need to have like a web server, like a Tomcat or a Jetty, to make sure that the requests actually make it to the controllers that the model view controller has for us. And that means also got to do the configuration. What if Spring Boot can help us with that? Spring Boot offers starters, and these starters will come in and allow us to pre-configure these things that we need to get started writing our applications faster. So bringing in the Spring Boot, Spring Web starter we see on our left, it's going to auto set up a Tomcat, or if you want, a Jetty, so that you can focus on writing a business problem. It will go ahead and pre-configure and have that set up for you within your application. We're going to demonstrate that for you in just a minute. But what good is a application unless I could store data away, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and want to store data away, how do I go about doing that? Well, guess what? We have a project out there called Spring Data. It does exactly this, and it has this wonderful mission. It says it's going to provide a familiar and consistent Spring-based programming model for data access while still retaining the special traits that are of the underlying data store. So no matter what database you like, Spring can meet you there. And when I mean what type of database type, I mean it. Whether you're doing JPA, LDAP, document database, key value database, um, relational database, it doesn't matter. And what this means is no matter what type of database you're using, you can use Spring's consistent way of querying, update data, no matter which database you take in or pull out. And here's the best part about doing that. You say, okay, Glenn, that's great, but what if I need that special feature that a document database offers? Spring says, look, that's great. Not only are we going to give you access to get a hold of maybe that consistency across, but if you need to use that special feature, it says, look, I'll allow you to have access to that special feature, but I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to make your life easier, make it easier for you to utilize these features. So whether you need the ability to go across many databases or focus on those special features of one type of database, Spring has you there. And oh, by the way, we have a starter for that too. Now, securing our application because we certainly don't want our company to pop in the news because of a security violation. How can we help our apps become more secure? And with that, we can bring in something called Spring Security. Spring Security is a powerful and highly customizable security framework. It is de facto standard for securing Spring-based applications. It offers comprehensive and extensive support for both authentication and authorization. It gives you protection against attacks like session fixation, click jacking, and cross-site request forgery, but and much more. But we had the community come in and say, "Oh, can y'all do us a favor? Or Spring, do y'all know of an authorization server? Do you have one?" And the Spring security team said, "Well, we can help out here." Last year, they released the Spring authorization server. So now, when it's time for you need for have an authorization server, take a look at the Spring authorization server. Now, this talk has been full of questions and answers, but why stop there? Where do we start? How do we start building our app? The first thing we always have to do is what? Build our project. And when we want to build our project, the best way for us to do it is to use what's called the Spring Initializer. The Spring Initializer will allow us to create our project. From here, we could say, do we want it to be a Gradle or a Maven project? What version of Spring Boot do I want? I want to set up my metadata. Do I want to release a jar or war? What version of Java do I want it to be? And then if we look on the right-hand side of the page, we can actually see that we can actually go in and add those starters we need to kick off our project. And if we look at the example I just gave, we see where we've added it here by clicking the Add Dependency button and then saying, I want the Spring Web, I want the Spring Data JPA, and I want Spring Security. But by doing this, what does the Spring Initializer do? In our case, we're going to choose Gradle, and then it says, okay, by selecting these dependencies, here are the dependencies we're going to add, and we can see them appear in the lower right-hand side of the page. But let's zoom in on one of those. What does it do in the background? Spring will go ahead and pick the right plugin, our starter version for us. It manages that for us. And then it says when we use that starter, it will make sure it pulls in the right versions of the apps that it needs or the dependencies it needs. It's taking care of it for us. So it's one thing to talk about it, but where do we get a hold of this Spring Initializer, right? And I'm going to quote Josh Long and say, let's go to the second best place on the internet. It is start.spring.io. And what's the best place he'll say, which I completely agree, production. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to put down my clicker and we're going to start writing some code together. Come on, let's join me over there on the coding side. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go to start.spring.io. And there we are. We have our Spring Initializer. We're going to use Gradle. I'm going to use the latest milestone release of the next release of Boot, which is 3.2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and set up my group here. And I'm going to call it .io.spring. I'm going to call it S1 demo. And then I'm going to make it a jar It'll be Java 17 since it's LTS, and 21's LTS too. I forgot I could have chosen that. I'm going to use the web to go ahead and utilize that starter. But now I want to explore the project. And before I can download, so basically what the initializer do is it's going to allow me to download a zip that I got to unzip, and I'll have my project ready to go. But before I do that, I can actually look at what it's going to give me. And by clicking it, I can see that we have the pulled in the Spring Boot starter here for me, or the Spring Boot parent for me, the correct version. Then we can see that we also brought in our what? Our dependencies here. And the one we chose was the starter web. And then we can actually go in and see that it gives us our first main here. We're going to zoom in on that and take a look. And you'll see it's annotated saying, hey, it's a Spring Boot app. All right. Now, we're going to go ahead and I think I already downloaded it. Nope, I didn't. So cool. I'm going to go ahead and download that. Go ahead and unzip it. And we see that it's here. I'm going to go to my handy dandy text editor, or not text editor, but my shell. And I'm going to change directory S1 demo. And we'll see LSAL. We'll see the project is there. Now I'm going to open up my IDE. There we go. And here we are. Here is our S1 demo project. And you'll see, whoop, we're going to close. There we go. We can actually go to our build.gradle and look, it provided exactly what the Explorer did that we saw on the page back at start.spring.io. Now we can go here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new class. I want to create a hello world for us, right? So I'm going to create a hello world controller, and I'm going to be so original, and I'm going to call it hello world controller. There we go. There we go. Oh, sound effects are free, no additional charge. It's all part of the free virtual experience at Spring One Virtual. All right, so we're going to zoom in here. And the first thing we're going to do is going to say at rest controller. And now I want to have a method. I'm going to make it a public string. I'm going to call it hello. Oh my gosh, I am so original. And we'll pass in a string called name. And I'll say return, let's call it, see, let's say hello S1 attendee. There we go. And we'll pop in the name, right? Name. There we go. But now I want to add an endpoint. I want it to be at the end of a hello endpoint. How do I do that? I'm going to say at get mapping, and I'm going to say / hello. There we go. Now, we have just written an app. It's just going to actually work. Let's kick it off. All right. So we're going to take and we're going to run it. And we'll see that the app is running. We see that Boot has already done a lot for us, right? By adding that starter, we see that it started a Tomcat, and we see it's at port 8080. Now, let's go to our browser, and we're going to go to localhost. Oh, you can tell I work on Spring Cloud Dataflow, can't you? There we go. We're going to go port 8080. There we go. And you see, I may have practiced this before. We could see that actually it said, hello, S1 attendee Bob. We could go in there and say Madura. We can say Jane, and we see that it's actually responding. But do you remember when we started talking about Spring Boot and how Spring Boot could actually go in and allow us to, it gave us not only that auto configuration and pick dependencies, it also gives us great defaults. So in this case, it chose the port to listen on, which is port 8080. So let's go back to our application, and we're going to change that port to something different. How do we do that? So the best way you're going to do it is through using the properties that are offered by Spring Boot when we set up and add that web dependency. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and call it server.port. And we see that defaults to 8080. We're going to change it to 9020. There we go. Now, we're going to restart our app. And it's going to start up, blah, blah. And we'll see now it's at port 9020. And we're going to go back to our browser. And if we hit refresh here, boom, it blows up. But now if I change it to 9020, boof, there we go. We see that it's a wonderfully functioning Yahoo. All right, now let's stop it here because I want to run another experiment. Oh my gosh, experimenting live on a live stream. Am I nuts? Well, yeah, I'm not, but that's okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and do a Gradle build. We're going to build a project because I want to check two things. We have not done any tuning on this app. It's just right out of the box. I want to know how much memory it takes, but I also want to know how fast it starts up. Okay. So here we go. We're going to do, and we're going to go ahead and run this app, java-jar, and we're going to call it, hit the build, libs, s1 demo, and Spring will tell us it started in 1.776 seconds. So we'll just say 1.8 seconds. That's how long it took for this app to start. Now, the next question is how much memory did it take? Okay, we could see that it took 424 meg. Now, here's something that's interesting. Last year, Spring Integrate, or actually over the past couple of years, Spring has worked with the Graal team. And if you've never heard of Graal, Graal is basically a team that has been able to create a way to natively compile Java. So you can have a faster startup time and also reduce memory footprint. Now, how hard is it for us to natively compile our application so that we can actually go in and maybe see if we can get at reduced footprint for our application. So how do we do that? Let's go back to our application here. We're going to go back to our build.gradle right here. And we're going to add in the Graal plugin. So we're going to add that plugin here. We see that I've added the Graal Build Tools native and the version. So we're going to be ready to rock and roll there for that plugin. And now to natively compile our app, we just have to do this, Gradle native compile. Oof. Now our app is going to be natively compiled. That's it, folks. We're ready to rock and roll. Now, while it's building this, it usually takes about a minute. We're going to go right back into our demonstration here, our presentation, and we're going to continue on looking at some scenarios. So I want to monitor my application. Let's go with a scenario. Let's say at 3 a.m. our application fails. It goes down. And we're like, okay, we got to go through, look at the logs, we got to look at everything to figure out what happened to it so we can take remediating action. But what if we could say, wait, what if we could see that problem happening before it actually fails? Let's say in the days or weeks prior to, we see that connection pool fill up, some odd logging errors. What if we could see something like this as time is going on? And Spring said, wouldn't it be great if we could be able to allow people to capture metrics and record that to their favorite observation system? And so we teamed up with the micrometer team. And the micrometer team says, look, what we offer is the ability for you to have a common interface to be able to access and or send out your metrics or observations to your favorite observation system, whether it's Wavefront, Prometheus, Influx, Datadog, whatever it is. You write to one interface and you can write those out to it. At the foundation level, Spring offers that feature by working with the micrometer team. And the thing is that not only can you get this wonderful interface to be able to hook into any of these observability systems by only learning one interface. Spring says, look, by adding the Spring Boot actuator, we can also report what's happening on the Spring side of stuff so you can have a full view of what your application is doing. And then you can enable or disable those through the classic properties. I can come in and set properties and say, I want maybe data and security to report its metrics, but maybe I don't need, maybe if I'm using Spring Cloud Task, I don't need it to do that. So we have these wonderful features that allow us to monitor our application. But then let's take a step back and say, what if it still hits 3 a.m., we didn't see it coming, and the app goes down? Luckily, we find out it is a new feature that we've added, and we have feature flags that allow us to disable that feature. Now, the good news is that we can do that, but it also means we got to go across all our environments this app is deployed, set the right property, and restart our app, basically repave our entire app deployment. That is it's not as easy as it sounds, is it? So what we're saying is, what if I could do this? What if my apps could go to one place, a configuration server, and get that configuration? That would be so awesome. And that way I could make a change in one place, and then all my apps can take advantage of it. Um, well, guess what? Spring can help you there. We have something called a configuration client, and you can add this starter, and then it's going to point to this particular configuration server and what get its properties there upon startup. So I don't have to go to all these environments and set them up. I go to one place to set up my configuration. You're like, okay, where do we get this configuration server from, Glenn? Well, Spring helps there too. We offer the Spring configuration server, and our configuration server basically allows you to do this. You can use Vault, GitHub, and I forget some others that it has that allows you to go to one place and you can have you can set your configuration and be able to set it there. And then when you restart your apps, they'll have what? That ability to have that one set of one place to go to get all their configurations. And you're like, well, that's cool, but that still means I got to restart all my apps. Well, there's one more thing there. We have something called Spring Cloud Bus that says this. If I update the property, our configuration server will notify the clients and saying, hey, this new property is updated, take appropriate action. So our apps in this particular case has this ability that I can go in and be able to make a change. That change get facilitated to my apps. I don't have to do what? I don't have to do all that repaving. Spring is there for you. Take a look. It's a great series of projects. All right. Okay, let's go back and talk about something kind of different. Let's say I have a lot of mobile apps. I have my mobile phones right here with me, and they're hitting off of RESTful APIs, right? And as they hit these RESTful APIs, they need only like 2 bits of data out of that RESTful API request, but they're getting all this data back. And so we're getting all this wasted data transfer. What if we could just maybe have a query language to be able on against the API and get exactly what we need, thus removing that wasteful data transfer? Well, guess what? A few years ago, a bunch of folks created something called GraphQL. That is exactly that. It allows you to write a request or a query to retrieve data that you need from the data from your API. And what was cool is that the GraphQL for Java team reached out to Spring and said, "Do you want to create a Spring for GraphQL project to make life easier for developers to create these type of controllers?" And guess what? They did. They teamed up and created Spring for GraphQL. And through this, you have the ability to allow your clients to ask for exactly what they need and get exactly what they want. Really cool project. I think Dan's giving a talk on it later today. Please jump in. It's great. Now, the other thing that I want us to be able to discuss is this. All right. So I need the ability to have my applications communicate with each other, but not lose messages. Because let's say we traditionally use HTTP, but what if we use something like a Kafka or a Rabbit or a Pulsar to be able to allow us to send messages to all our apps so that they can communicate without loss of messages? That's great, but guess what? I got to learn all the APIs to Kafka, Pulsar, and to Rabbit. And at our company, we use all of them, right? Well, what if I said that we have projects out there that kind of give you that same type of feel that Spring Data does, which you'll see it's kind of across the Spring portfolio. What if we give you one consistent way to be able to publish and consume messages, and you didn't have to worry about which particular framework you're using, a messaging framework. You just write to that one particular interface, and then you're ready to rock and roll. No matter whether it's Rabbit, Kafka, or even Pulsar, you're set up. But you're saying, Glenn, but we use a special features like we're using Kafka streams. Can Spring help us out there? And again, whether you need just that consistency across all your various types, or you need to be able to access that special features that the messaging framework offers, you're in good shape because Spring offers that ability for you to go down and utilize those features and simplify that for you. It's pretty awesome what you can do with these various projects. But Spring said, well, what if we were to make it even easier? What if we allowed folks to write just a Java 8 function? And through this Java 8 function, we could take and you could pull in a dependency, something maybe like called Spring Cloud Stream, and then you could use properties to tell what topic you want as your input into your function, and the return value of your function goes out to another topic. and you set those up for properties, and all that configuration hook into the messaging framework's done for you. You're allowed to, in this case, to be able to allow for the flow of your data to come through a function and you not have to write any specialized codes. It allows you to focus on the business problem. One of the questions that I like to hear or get commonly about Spring Cloud Stream, can I have maybe a function that takes in data from a Kafka and then write it out to a Pulsar or vice versa? And the answer is absolutely. Spring Cloud Stream says, look, what you can do is you can just set up your properties to say the input to this function comes from Kafka and the output goes to this Pulsar topic. It's a lot of fun. Take a look at the project. All right, let's go back to HTTP. Okay, how can we route the messages from our client apps that to the correct service? Is there something that Spring can help us with that? Well, guess what? We do. We have something called Spring Cloud Gateway, and Spring, oh, even has a starter here. Spring Cloud Gateway basically does this. It provides a secure and flexible way for us to route and manage incoming requests from clients to the correct service. It enables us to do this through efficient configuration where the request, to specify where the correct requests are to be routed. It also enforces security. It also enables monitoring, so I know how the messages are going through, which services are getting hit the most. I can check the speeds, all that good stuff. So I can be able to know how to modify that configuration and do, and it, again, Gateway offers a simple way to do that, or to scale up or scale down services. It's a really cool project. And oh, I forgot, it also offers circuit breakers. So if that particular service is down, you can give a meaningful or useful message back to your users. Now, let's go on and let's say that we do something called like batch processing, where we maybe kick off stuff in the middle of the night and we run our heavy ETL or heavy computes. Does Spring have something there for us? And the answer is absolutely, because we don't want to have to keep writing all this boilerplate code where we're reading from this file and writing out to this database, or reading from this database and writing out to some messaging framework. We want something that we can focus on solving the business problem. And with that, we have something called Spring Batch. And Spring Batch Day basically does this. It provides you a series of folders. And through these series of builders, Glenn, builders. I haven't had my coffee yet. And in this case, we have these builders. And basically what these builders allow us to do is to be able to design our job. And then as I'm designing the job, I can configure, notice I said configure, how we want the transactions to be handled. I don't have to code that. It's done through configuration. And after I've designed this flow, Spring Batch also offers something else, restartability. Let's say I'm processing 5 million records and at record 2 million, it fails. Okay, whoops. Well, what we don't want to do is when we restart our app, we don't want to have to pick up from the first record. We want to have it pick up at 2 million. And this is very common because it could be we're enriching data, we're grabbing data from a service and we're enriching our data as we're processing, and at record 2 million, that service goes down. We've retried, which Spring Batch offers that retry feature, but it times out. What we want to do is when we start our app, we won't pick up at that 2 million record. Spring Batch offers that feature. And the best part is it gives you a execution context that you can go in, put that data in so you can tune exactly how you want the app to restart. And then you say, well, Glenn, that's great, but I still got to write all those readers and writers. Nope. Spring Batch also offers builders, so that with those builders you can again construct, whether you're reading from a flat file, relational database, document database, key value store. Oh my goodness, I've got all messaging frameworks, and similarly, I have a builder for the writers. So what code you're writing besides just setting up the builds through those builders is the actual processing code. Focus on the business problem is what our goal is to help you do. And then when it's time to deploy your batch app out to your favorite cloud or to your local infra, Spring Cloud Task gives you a lot of features that simplify the running of your job or your ephemeral applications or your short-lived apps in production. And then when it's time for you to say, look, we need to know what batch jobs are running, which ones have failed, how can we restart them? We need to be able to have workflows. Bring in Spring Cloud. Oops, I went too far. Bring in Spring Cloud Data Flow, and Spring Cloud Data Flow allow you to orchestrate the how you're running your jobs and being able to do all those things, as well as when we talk about Spring Cloud Stream, it allows us to be able to deploy a series of applications that can handle the events we have to handle through our company, and we can be able to do that design through Spring Cloud Data Flow. Serverless. Oh my goodness, with functions. I love functions. All right, so with functions, we basically want to deploy a function out to a PaaS, but a lot of people say I really love the Spring goodness, the dependency injection, the auto configuration, the great defaults. Can I use Spring in a function? Absolutely. There's a project we have called Spring Cloud Function that does that for us. It has these goals. It promotes the implementation of business logic through functions. And by writing one function, not only can I use that function in the fast, I could also maybe use it as a web endpoint, as a stream processor. Remember, we talked about the streams, right? I can use that function anywhere I need it. Spring Cloud Function facilitates that. And you're like, well, Glenn, that's great. But the problem that we have is that, starting up that JVM for the first time is a little slow. Now, I know after that, they're fast, but that first time slow. Uh, can we natively compile our functions? Absolutely. Spring can allow you to natively compile your Spring Cloud Function apps so that you get that fast startup. Wait a minute. That reminds me. Uh, let's go look and see what happened with our deployment over here, our demo. And whoops, did that again. Let me get this right. Here we go. There we go. We'll go there. And let's see if we may have gotten a slight improvement here. Now, remember, it was like 1.7 seconds, I think. No, it was 1.7, 1.8 seconds. Let's see if we run our natively compiled app of our Hello World and see if maybe it's a little faster. So in this case, I'm going to go to build, and I'm going to go to native, and then I'm going to do S1 demo, and it started in 0.093 seconds. That's a significant improvement. And as Josh will do a couple of times, you can also go in and kick it off again, and it gives 0.054. So we can see that we have a dramatic improvement in speed. Now, the next question is what? Can we see how much memory it uses now? Remember, it was what, 424 meg? All right, how big is it now? It's down to 64 meg. So what we can see is that we can look at using raw VM and Spring together to natively compile our apps. So we can reduce the amount of space it takes, as well as the speed at which it starts. And this allows us to put more apps into our compute resources, thus reducing cost and energy usage. Now, let's go back to our presentation. And now, it's one thing to say that we can utilize this as a performance boost, but the other question is can we write, what are tools out there that we can use to write more performant code? A lot of people use reactive-based coding, right? And if you are reactive-based coding, it's like, can Spring help me? Right? Does it support reactive coding? Absolutely. Again, we go all the way back to the framework, and basically we work with this reactive project so that you can write all your code using reactive, and know that your Spring projects out there also support what? Reactive based coding. And you're like, well, Glenn, we like imperative coding, and we're looking at maybe using Loom, and the virtual threads that are offered through Loom, or what we call fibers. Does Spring support the virtual threads through Loom? As of the next release of Spring, framework and Spring Boot that's coming out a little bit later this year, you can utilize Project Loom virtual threads within your Spring apps and know that you're fully supported there. Now, I cannot leave a presentation unless I say the following. Oh yes, I'm saying AI. Oh my gosh, I can't leave without saying that at least once. Yes, introducing this year, we've kicked off a project called Spring AI. So no matter whether you're trying to do prompt engineering, you need to be able to utilize vector DBs, whether you need support for updating or creating your models, and a lot of other features that are offered by the AI world. Spring AI is there. Take a look at the project, kick the tires, give the team some feedback. It is on its way, and I have played with it. It's a lot of fun. I know. I really like my job. It's a lot of good stuff here. All right, folks. Oh, I forgot to put the little Lego down there. Okay, let's go on. So, folks, I want to pick the right framework so I can have a strong foundation to build my business. So let's take a look at it. The breadth of use cases. Spring, as we've seen, has a lot of features out there that may be able to support you through the use cases that you're building. We can also be able to look at the various projects that allow us to create those, simplify the creation of those features that we need for our business applications. One thing I forgot to mention, whether you're writing microservices or monoliths, Spring is there for you. We have a project that we introduced last year called, or actually this year, sorry, it's this year, Spring Modulith, that talks about how to, gives you the tools to be able to write a modularized Spring monolith application. Gives you tools like for documenting, enforcing the modularization, and so much more. If you are writing monoliths, way to go. If you're writing microservices, way to go. But if you are writing a monolith, take a look at the Spring Modulith project. The other thing is that Spring is stable. Yes, we're 20 years old. And not only that, it's just like Deshaun said, if you need support, Spring offers commercial support. Check out spring.io, learn more about it. When it's time for you to say, look, we are looking at moving to Spring, or maybe we've got some old apps and we want to upgrade them, we need a little bit of help, we have consulting. So take a look at Spring Consulting. And you're like, I want to know more about Spring. Is there a place I could kind of dig in and play with Spring a bit more? Check out Spring Academy. The login is free. You get a bunch of first starting courses right out the box. And then lastly, you have the ability to sign on to Pro and get your certification as well as um, uh, I'm going to get certification as well as use the professional level of training there. Flexibility. Again, as we've seen many times in our presentation, no matter what technology you're using, you're in great shape with Spring because Spring will say whether you're using whatever messaging framework, observation system, database type, and on, even to Spring AI, you're in great shape because it allows you to swap those technologies. And as we've discussed, we are growing. The number of features that Spring adds year over year is increasing, but also our base of programmers out there, they're starting new projects. It's growing year over year. Okay, folks, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to probably join y'all over for some Q&A, and I'm going to hand it off back to our folks at Central Control so they can do the proper handoff to our next series of speakers.